Mr. Fussy by Roger Hargreaves. Mr. Fussy was fussy about everything. Everything had to be neat and tidy and its proper place. Mr. Fussy spent all the day and every day arranging his furniture and making sure the flowers grew in a straight line in his garden, trying to find specks of dirt where there couldn't possibly be specks of dust, because he spent all his time making sure there wasn't any specks of dirt. One fine morning, Mr. Fussy was having breakfast. He was very fussy about what he ate. He opened the marmalade pot. "Ah!" he screamed. "It's got piss in it!" And he spent the rest of the morning separating the piss from the marmalade, or if you prefer, the marmalade from the piss. Fussy old Fussy Pot, people used to call him. Then Mr. Fussy went out into his garden and spent the rest of the day straightening out all the rays of grass in his lawn. Fussy old Fussy Pot. That evening, Mr. Fussy was in his kitchen ironing his shoelaces when he heard a loud crash. He heard a crash outside. "What's to do?" he murmured to himself, and hurried outside to embrace straight. There was a broken iron gate in one hand, an old battered suitcase in the other, a species grin on his face, stood an untidy person. "Mr. Clumsy." "Oops," he said, holding up the iron gate. "It came off my hand." "Who?" returned Mr. Fussy, looking in horror at his garden gate. "Are you?" "I'm Mr. Clumsy," replied the untidy person, grinning, and he stepped forward to shake Mr. Fussy's hand, but tripped over and fell on the lawn. "My grass!" cried Mr. Fussy. "My sweet grass! You have bent it!" And he got down on his hands and knees and started straightening the grass. "But who are you?" he asked over his shoulder. "And why are you here?" "I'm your cousin," replied Mr. Clumsy. "Your long-lost cousin from Australia. I come to visit." "Are you pleased to see me?" continued Mr. Clumsy cheerfully, knocking over a flower or two as he got off, and picked up his suitcase, knocking over another flower or two or three. Mr. Fussy, quite obviously, wasn't pleased to see him. "You better come in," he muttered. "I say," remarked Mr. Clumsy, looking through the front door of Mr. Fussy's house. "I say, what a neat little place you got here." And he stepped inside, tripped over his shoelace, and knocked over a chair, and dropped his suitcase, and fell in an untidy heap on the floor. "Oops," he said. Mr. Fussy shut his eyes and had a sigh, and groaned silent to himself. Later that evening, after Mr. Clumsy had cooked them a meal, after Mr. Clumsy had helped with the washing up, they sat down to thought. Mr. Fussy sat, as he always did, in a neat and tidy fashion. Mr. Clumsy sat, as he always did, in a not so neat and tidy fashion. "How long are you staying?" asked Mr. Fussy. "Oh, I don't know," grinned Mr. Clumsy. "A few days, a week, a year, I haven't decided." When he awoke in the morning, Mr. Fussy jumped out of bed and went into his bathroom. "Oh no," he gasped. "Oh no. Oh yes." Mr. Clumsy had been there before him. The towels lay in a heap on the floor. The bath was full of water. There were pools of water all over the bathroom floor, and half a tube of toothpaste. What a mess! Mr. Fussy made it all neat and tidy as quickly as he could. And Mr. Fussy hurried down the stairs. "Morning," said his cousin cheerfully. "I cooked your breakfast. Sit down." There was an awful mess everywhere. "There we are," said Mr. Clumsy, carrying a plate of fried eggs towards the table. "Breakfast!" And he tripped over those shoelaces of his, and then the eggs flew through the air and they land all over Mr. Fussy, sticky, grassy, yellow fried eggs. "Oops," said Mr. Clumsy. After a week, Mr. Fussy's house didn't look like Mr. Fussy's house anymore at all. But after 2 weeks, Mr. Clumsy decided to move on. "Thank you for having me," he said to Mr. Fussy. "It was very nice to see you," replied Mr. Fussy lightly. But what he was thinking was, "It's very nice to see you going." "Cheerio," said Mr. Clumsy, and he went with his battered old suitcase. "Goodbye," called Mr. Fussy, very meaning. "Good riddance." Then Mr. Fussy passed around his house as he never fussed before. Fussy old Fussy Pot, polishing and mending and repairing and straightening and sorting out and cleaning and putting everything back exactly as it had been before Mr. Clumsy had come to stay. He even does the flowers in the garden. "Hello," said That evening, Mr. Fussy was in his kitchen, polishing an egg, when he heard a loud crash outside. "Oh no," he groaned. "Not Mr. Clumsy again. It can't be. It mustn't be. It isn't." And it wasn't. It was somebody else. Somebody who had just walked straight through Mr. Fussy's garden gate. Somebody who can't help having little accidents. Somebody you may have met before. "Hello," smiled Mr. Bump. "I come to visit." The end.